Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us. It's very nice being here. I really appreciate that. In my research work, Ola Hanset, who formerly presented here this morning, and Claudio Shibora has been the most influential people. So I'm extra grateful for being invited here to Italy. And as the years grow, you also realize that these people do not just influence your research work, they influence your life, the way you think, the way you act, etc. Just like you talked about how IT will be a bigger part of our life, also different individuals have impact in the past and the choices we've made. So when we are going to talk to you today about the Swedish infrastructure concept, it has taken huge influential from Claudio Shibora's work. I just wanted to mention that in particular. With me I have...
Hello, my name is Johan Eltes. I'm a doctoral student with Nina Ismail's professor, an industrial student. My daily work is to be CTO of Inera AB, and that's the company created by the Swedish care buyers, all the county councils and municipalities, to manage the national eHealth rollouts. And my work is to manage the national reference architecture for eHealth in Sweden.
So Karolinska Institute has a long history, and last year it was ranked the 58th best university in the world. We are very grateful that we have the possibility to give out the award of the Nobel Prize in either medicine or physiology every year.
Yes, and what about Swedish eHealth then? I thought we could give you some numbers. The Swedish healthcare system is built of 21 county councils who finance the Swedish care through tax money, and is controlled by regional politicians. So there is no state-controlled healthcare in Sweden. And also home care is managed by the 290 municipalities. We also have an increasing part of private care providers. And in total, we have several thousand care providers rather than legal entities. The population of Sweden is increasing, and it's somewhere between 9 and 10 million people today. Since a while back, we have 100% coverage of electronic health records, which is both an advantage and a huge legacy in terms of old technology, of course. We have some advantages that makes life easy for us when we are trying to roll out national initiatives. And the foremost of those is probably that we have a national registry of citizens with ID and address and so on, managed by an agency, governmental agency. Due to that, roughly 70% of the population use digital IDs in governmental e-services already in 2012. We will tell you more about the Swedish patient portal and services we have there during the speech. But just to compare with the figures of Italy that was mentioned this morning, 23% of the Swedish population are active users of the current patient portal.
And we don't really see that as an increasing number, as not all Swedish inhabitants are ill and need to be patients. So we think it's quite a high number, considering that it is for patients, not citizens. We work from a holistic perspective, and my driving force is to build reusable technical components that are used in large volumes. That means that we don't do like they've done in Denmark, that we have one architecture for electronic health records and another architecture for patient health record. We use the same architecture for many different needs, for patient needs, citizens' needs, healthcare needs, but of course also for research needs. But there are more needs. It could be quality registers or other kind of registers. So our aim is to reuse the same technical components for all the different aims. Thank you. When we started to build this architecture, we did it from a patient perspective. And the choice of making it a patient perspective was simply because that was the way to go forward and get the implementation aligned. And like Margun talked about how the implementation strategies, and as the politicians in Sweden wanted to see more empowered patients, we knew that if we would take a patient perspective of starting to build the architecture, we would get the grants and get the blessing in order to start to build the national architecture. But of course, as we built both back-end and front-end for citizens, services like request statuses, a request has been sent, it has been received, the patient has been booked for an appointment, it could be a radiology examination, the diagnosis has been set on the radiology images. The healthcare itself wanted to have that kind of information as well. It made an uneven relation if the patient had other information than healthcare had. So it wasn't so difficult to use to get the political work and get the negotiations in place in order to be able to use the same architecture for healthcare. At that time, we had a national patient EHR system, but that system didn't hold as detailed data as the patient health record had. So there we made a swap of the background of the architecture for healthcare. After that, I'd like to bring on Ole's speech. Ole mentioned that the complexity lies in the producer and the consumer, and that the intelligence is in the producing systems and in the consuming system and not in the middle. So in order to stimulate the intelligent new decision support system and other kind of services, we made an innovation application framework. So that innovation application framework holds the intelligence and the complexity regarding, for instance, access rights. We heard earlier from another speaker the challenges of identifying the correct and relevant consents in order to give access to new and other services. So in this framework, a developer can take the code that is needed to secure that the correct access right is applied before giving access to any clinical and patient-related data. And in Sweden, as in different countries, there is different legislation around the patient's access to data, the medical professionals' access rights to data, researchers' access right to data, other ministries' right to data. So this complexity doesn't need to be held into the developer of the new services company. Instead, they can come in and take the code for that complexity from the application framework. Also, in this application framework, we hold the access to different kind of clinical data, because in the information infrastructure within healthcare, of course, there are no REST APIs and other kind of technology that modern developers use. So there you can access APIs which give you access to data on a national level related to one or more patients. Moreover, there is other kind of functionalities which you can go and take from the application framework. One of them is a patient care connector. We have talked about and we have heard about big data and what's coming up around the corner today from many different speakers. And big data is also produced by the patient herself. from sensor technology, from other kind of data from the patient. And this is a technology where the patient, from her phone or from a mobile EKG or from a pulse or from the steps or from the weight which is in your mobile, can share that data on a regular basis with either healthcare or with research. Why is that interesting? Well, that's interesting because 80% of the patients in Sweden are sick with chronic diseases, and they have 1 to 2 visits at the doctor every year. And that particular day does not represent how they felt since they visited healthcare the last time. So instead, with this kind of technology, healthcare can, from a distance, monitor the patients, and if the trajectory of the patient goes above or beneath certain values, actually healthcare can make a call to the patient and book a new appointment. This was just a few examples. The next step that we are right now presently entering is to giving access from this architecture to the research work and the academic world of the industry. Because at least in Sweden, if you are a medical researcher and you get grants for 3 years, in average it takes you 2 years to identify your patients and the data. And then you have 1 year for the analysis and for the writing of articles. This should not take more than 3 months, we believe. So, in Sweden, we have worked for, like you said, for a long time. We've worked with the same aims, and the aims has helped us a lot. We haven't always realized the aims just as they were. And very much like Margun, the story that Margun before told, where we started out with one national system, it wasn't shown in practice that it was used to the extent that we have invested in it. Instead, we started to use the de facto architecture that we built for the patients. So we have many different examples that are similar, but we do also, as I mentioned in the beginning, have a little bit different approach when it comes to architecture. So now I give it to you, Johan, for the architecture.
Yeah, and as Nina mentioned, there's been a program at the state level in two big cycles. The first one was from 2009 to 2012, and that started off with the European Union decision that every member state should have an eHealth strategy. And the result of that was a 3-year plan, which was then extended as a new 5-year plan, as we see here. And in 2007, when that was decided, all the county councils come together to design an architecture that would support the planned evolution of eHealth. And that resulted in a reference architecture, a paper product, a set of patterns, infrastructure patterns, that was agreed across all the care buyers. And the organization that I work for was part of that and has then had a task together with the collaborating county councils to realize that part by part, along with the request for specific capabilities. So we didn't implement everything at once. We decided for the reference architecture, and the various capabilities defined in the reference architecture were introduced when there was a concrete need, a concrete project that actually validated it. So we have had that reference architecture operational for 10 years now, on a daily basis. I thought I could summarize some of the core properties of the eHealth architecture and infrastructure in Sweden. And after listening to all the speeches so far, it seems that we have kind of a common vision across all the countries. We have about the same properties that we seem to value. Yes. And for us, the top 3 ones could be, first of all, that there is a single information infrastructure to secure interoperability on the wire on behalf of personal data controllers, which are the data owners. So we have a good experience of having one infrastructure and governing body that can sort out the details when it comes to interoperability and take all the detailed decisions that make things work across all parties. And that is launched as on the concept of a virtual national EHR. And also that every eHealth initiative supports incremental adoption, which Margot was talking about before lunch. So every initiative needs to show that it can yield value as soon as there are basically two connected parties. So nothing should require everything is connected before we see the value of the initiatives. And third, that the eHealth information exchange architecture is strategic, while the distribution of data and solutions isn't. And I will get back to that on a while. We don't have any decided central storage locations for data. Wherever data ends up, but by whatever means data enters the system, it should be accessible for everyone who needs it. And I thought I could give a quick example of how things work. These are two of the national e-services that Nina mentioned. It's the patient EHR viewer, and it's the corresponding viewer for the healthcare professionals. And they both utilize the architecture. And this is a rough PowerPoint animation, and it shows the architecture at a very abstract level. But basically at the top, we see information consumers, service consumers of this service-oriented architecture. And we see the national infrastructure, the virtual national electronic health record. And we see one of 100 services that we have there related to vaccinations. And then we see the patient registry, and we see all the connected EHR systems, which also has to keep the patient registry updated on a more or less real-time basis. So when an application sends a request, it enters the service, which talks to the patient registry, get informed about in which systems does this patient have vaccinations. And the same request is then forwarded. It's the same informatics standard all over the system. So there are no transformations, no adaptations. Just possibility is at the endpoint. Thank you, Ole, for that structure. And then the information is aggregated from the sources and can then be utilized for presentation or whatever. And this structure is basically used for any information exchange that we do, not only to get data, also for transactions, booking, make reservations, exchange requests, lab orders, etc. So you should mention, yeah. Okay. Just a quick step back. The gray boxes on your right hand there, the topmost, the middle box there, shows what Nina talked about, that there is, to being a service consumer, like the topmost application here, and being an intelligent endpoint also imposes requirements in terms of access control and be conform to all legal requirements. So there is an application framework where you can copy code that helps you with that. And then we also have the national framework. Yeah. The last part that we are working with now is highlighted on this picture. So the patient have access to its data online from all connected systems across Sweden. The new feature that we try to launch is the ability for the patient to direct its data, basically copy data to other services that is of interest to the patient. It could be patients like me, it could be Runkeeper, it could be a private research company that you want to support with your data, basically anything. So we have created an infrastructure, an API-based infrastructure for that, to give that control to the patient, utilizing exactly the same trust model and security protocols as social services do. So when you share information between Runkeeper and a patient service or between Twitter and LinkedIn or whatever. It's exactly the same metaphor and the same technical standards used. There are more.
So this is just an illustration of the connected. All the county councils are connected, and here we have about 7 out of more than 100 protocols, national protocols. And as you can see, not all county councils has mapped their data to all the protocols, and not all systems in all county council are being mapped, and that is how technology works. You will never get 100%, but they all have a plan for increasing the connectivity in between the local and the national. And as this connectivity increases, as Ole said this morning, the use gets much increased. So if I summarize now, why have we done it in this way? We have done it in this way as innovation becomes fast and cost effective. We don't get any lock-in effects as the healthcare EHR systems are being mapped to the national infrastructure. We do get secure communication through the innovation framework, which is used for the new services, which guarantees the correct consent and more. We get more connections that provide more benefits and value for patients, medical staff, and research and other actors which have an interest in medical information or patient register data. Thank you.